the world, and how migration and movement and mobility also does that, kind of answer some of those questions that we otherwise can't get if we keep the kind of American conceptualist or state-centered type of studies at the core of our project. So it was really just a comment to kind of, talk about those conversations that Americans have been having for the last several years about, why we need to do this, because that's something I think about too. What are the limits, right? If we kind of think more abstractly and broadly, do we actually lose that focus that is actually essential to a lot of our studies? So that's all. Thank you.
Come all the way up, David.
This is more of a kind of a restatement, and then I think I'm just going to be re-articulating something that that Nancy captured.
Say who you are, though.
Oh, I'm David Freund, and I teach at the University of Maryland, College Park. And kind of reiterating something you said that captures a sentiment that I heard here before, and it is also sort of a response to the question of the balance between the local and the global. It's also about the teaching question. So I just wanted to articulate something that might be just obvious to everyone, but the degree to which we focus on not just our teaching but our research around questions demands that we attend to all of these scales. I don't know if I have anything more to say than that. It just seems like that, I've been thinking a lot about the way I teach my courses lately. I've been moving towards naming them around questions, because so that we can come back to those as a class. Like I teach a class called What Makes a City. So we can keep coming back to that, or what does government do? So that the question is the thing that ties it together, and then you're responsible for all these scales. You're responsible for the conceptual part. You're responsible for the fire hydrant, and kind of everything in between. So again, I'm not saying anything, I'm just kind of restating that and wanted to reaffirm the way that you phrase that.
It also makes essay assignments really easy.
Yeah. And I also appreciate the idea of, think about it. Almost everything has to be thought of in terms of multiple scales. There's nothing that exists in a single scale. And so part of the question is, well, so what is going on at various different scales all at once? And can we? And let's treat scale as an empirical question. What scale are these things going on? Don't just start with, oh, it's all global. Well, tell me, show me. Show me that it's circum-Caribbean, or show me that it's cross-border, or show me that it's an Atlantic phenomenon, and then prove it. And
then show me that's relevant for that local place.
And then show me it's relevant for that for whatever place it is, whether it's local, regional, urban, metropolitan, neighborhood, hemisphere. You can and let's get really super creative about naming scales. What about an environmental footprint? What about atmosphere versus or desert, or any number of other kinds of ways that we could trans-desert or desert coastal, those kinds of things using environmental terms. It seems to me that there's an enormous vocabulary out there of scale that not only should be thought of in naming the scale and getting empirically, but then on top of that, thinking about that fire hydrant as being the creation of the many multiple things that we've proven are out there.
And tires.
Yeah.
Just to talk about that, because I thought the plenary captured this so well. The thing that you talked about in the plenary, to show those rubber trees, show a stack of tires, and then think about what we all know went into the building of post-war suburbia and all the materials went into it. Those are the things that make those scales really concrete and relevant.
Yeah. Sir, yes, please tell us who you are. And
hi, Kun Wee from University of Hong Kong.
Oh,
can I stay here? Or?
Yeah, just speak very, very clearly and loud.
Right. I appreciate the project on different levels. The fact that we're also discussing them in terms of the terms of choice. What is the transnational, the global, the international? And I think this kind of the language sort of reveals when this was sort of invented. So it speaks to a kind of methodological approach. So I think a lot of our questions resonate with that. Now my question, or maybe provocation, goes something like this. And I struggle with this as well. When we sort of use the global, we sort of we're using the very same methodology of the powerful that is embedded into these discussions, these hidden power projects, to sort of circumnavigate and to reveal problems. I wonder, just in terms of your choice of the frameworks around which you've resurrected for the project, whether you would think about revealing the project behind this other name, the global, and the disciplinary limits. But because in coming up with the idea of a course, on one hand I've named a class called Globalization and Resistance in Architecture. On the other hand, I've also named it Globalization and Architecture, just to sort of subdue the sort of overly critical stances. But it's just something as a question for you guys. Do you think it's necessary to sort of announce the project behind the project, or to sort of keep it broad and inviting? Or is there any chance that you get mistaken, like the way Sassen was mistaken to be the kind of harbinger of global cities, and get invited by mayors to give them a new global city? There are these sort of misleading sort of possibilities. Yeah.
Who wants to take that one?
I love globalization and resistance.
Okay, yeah. So as I understand the question briefly, is that you want us to consider the idea of taking the project behind the word global, using the word global, with its connotations of all powerfulness. Maybe I'm not understanding the question too.
Yeah. About that, I sense that there is this project of a project of resistance, a project of revelation. That the global is the trope, but it's a problematic trope.
So thinking about the problematics of starting with the word global, and its implicit understanding that there must be resistance to it. Is that right? I mean, I think that one of the interesting things would be too, just to think about. I've often said the word global is an awe word, okay, as opposed to a shock word, say, or something like that. It's one that makes us think, oh my God, this is amazing, right? Okay, to think positively, but also to think, oh, I can fly like a bird way above. I can become the person who can look at the world like a map. And all of its complexity, from very high up, and gain that sense of epistemological power, really. And then there's also a second thing, which is that in order to act globally, you have to have a massive amounts of power to be able to do so. And I think, in some ways, I think that's what Saskia Sassen was trading on, and maybe we're trading on it as well, to some degree. I guess, once again, I guess I want to be, at the same time as I want to imagine that it's very possible for certain things to be truly global, I want that word to be more a kind of call to, like, prove it. And second of all, I guess I'd like it also to be a chance for us to think about, well, is it always only the very powerful who act globally, or is it very possible for people who have absolutely no power to act on immense scales, whether or not they're global or not? And I think in this case, particularly in the urban world, the single largest part of the built environment has been built by people who have a bunch of cardboard together, or a bunch of wood and some tires, possibly, and they're building gigantic parts of the city collectively, mostly in the peripheries of the global south. But that to me is an immense phenomenon. I don't know if you want to call it global, and certainly being done right in the teeth of the entire property regime of the neoliberal world. So just so and the migrations that brought them there are yet another piece of that.
So this is exactly what we were talking about, where words have different flavors depending on where you're from. And I came across this problem too when I was talking to Singaporean scholars, and And they were like, well, global kind of means invasion, and like it means the sort of neoliberal project, and it means the sort of the new age of exploration from north to south and this sort of things. And I said, oh, wow, I had no idea. You know, global to me meant rejecting the U.S. government as the preeminent source of knowledge. You know, so again, these words come into these clashes, and I think that's great that you're sort of raising this question. I take a couple of different other institutions as personal models. For instance, the Slum Dwellers International I take as a model, because even people in the most material deprived circumstances are very interested in learning from people cross-culturally and also learning sort of globally. And they've developed this network, and it's very effective in sharing ideas of exactly this, what you're describing, Carl. And then the other I take as an example is the initiative by Teddy Cruz and Vanna Foreman, which is really about, given that universities have more resources than people who live in Tijuana, for instance, how can the university be turned into something that helps people achieve what they have as their initial goals to begin with? So the university in service of sort of thing. So I see both of these as interesting models for what we can think about for our project as well.